But first of all, I just want to say how disingenuous it is for anyone to suggest the issue of documenting people. The same people who are saying we must document people are the same people that always say we don't have borders. So what is the plan? We're going to document people, and then they're still going to come in, and then you're going to document more people, and then they're still going to come in. That's not a solution, and I don't think any person who loves this country will ever think of anything like that. And like I said, none of these people who are saying these people must come into our country want them to live in their communities. It's always people who live in these communities that are upper that want to subject the poor people to even more competition, even more poverty, even more strained resources. So our South African communities must not grow. I mean, schools in Umhlanga are doing well. They've got swimming pools, etc. But come to the locations, Soweto, Alex, KwaMashu, and you won't find those resources. And the reason we can't grow in infrastructure is because we're so busy nursing feelings of other African countries who have subjected their own people to poverty. It's not our responsibility to take care of the failures of other African countries. And for the fact that people like Sharon keep saying that we must feel sad for other African countries, this is the very reason why Africa as a continent is not going to grow. Let me tell you, if the likes of Lawyers for Human Rights and other organizations really cared about Africans, they would be trying to improve the rest of Africa. But that's not what they want to do. They want to see South Africa fail dismally so that they can usher in a new government that they think is going to be more suitable to run South Africa either than the one that is run. And I'm going to say it. I know you're going to say I'm wrong for this, but they would love to see the African government run by black people government fail so that they can come and take over. That's my stand and that's my belief. But just in this whole issue of immigration is a process that is legal. It happens legally. The reason why we ask certain people to come into a country in a certain way and at a certain time is to allow for background checks to be done on that particular individual who wants to come into the country, to make sure that that person is not running away from other things that they've done in the country. They're not mercenaries, they're not on Interpol, etc. But we're not allowed to do that according to the likes of Lawyers for Human Rights, because we must just take every single person, no matter how horrible they are, and they must come live in South Africa, and then we must shut up about it, because if we don't shut up about it, then we're xenophobic. These same NGOs and NPOs, as I'm wrapping up, Clement, we were with the Department of Social Development, and one of the critical questions that we asked them is that as a Department of Social Development, how do you verify that all these NPOs and NGOs that are getting funding are using this money to sustain the very people they keep flooding us with? Because remember, the United Nations does not fund the South African government. They fund organizations exactly like the Lawyers for Human Rights and Somalis in South Africa and Nigerians in South Africa. So where is that money coming from, and what are they doing with it if they're not funding for the livelihood of their own people?
That this toxic culture of hating and othering on social media isn't accidental. It is deeply tied to the profit models of major tech companies like Amazon and Google and X. Our problems are one of the failure to transform our country, wealth redistribution. The richest remain a tiny percentage in our country, predominantly white people, and our government, in order to address the conditions, the lack of resources, the informal settlements, the conditions that people are living under in townships, is to enforce a universal income grant and a wealth tax. The current hating of migrants is scapegoating, where parties like MK, like the Patriotic Alliance, like Herman Mashaba's Action SA, are scraping the bottom of the barrel in order to try and get people to vote for them by making all our problems because of the migrants. And our problems are not because of the migrants. The problems are because of poverty, driven by inequality in our country, and by corruption like the Guptas, and corruption and mismanagement as being exposed in the Madlanga Commission.
Sharon, let me start with you, and I want to start with this question, this suggestion that's being made about regularizing illegal immigrants. Could legalizing undocumented migrants in South Africa reduce the pressure and restore order, or would it deepen this existing crisis?
Well, I mean, I think, and I want to address your point of the existing crisis and what is the crisis. But I think that in the context of South Africa in particular, and I agree this is a global phenomenon, and what's worrying about this global phenomenon is that it is particularly black and brown bodies that are being repressed by actions of ICE in America, by Europe keeping out people that happen to have a black or a brown skin for fear of contaminating those populations, predominantly white people in Europe and America. It's the complexity in South Africa needs to be discussed as well. But I would support the amnesty, and for this reason, that our current documentation system, the asylum system, is in crisis. And the crisis is caused by the fact that there is a constitutional violation. That violation is located in the administrative justice, the aspect of our constitution, that's section 33, that says everyone has the right to administrative action. And what we are seeing is that there's a serious failure in ensuring administrative justice. And the Department of Home Affairs is not only failing people seeking refuge, asylum seekers, refugees, but it's also failing South Africans, and predominantly working class South Africans. There are figures of about 7 million South Africans who've had their IDs blocked just arbitrarily by this same department. So there is a problem of the administration of documentation, and I want to put it to you that is located in our past, in the way in which black people are treated like cattle, and the complexities of documentation. Just a simple thing like birth registration of babies was a serious crisis because you were black and your no access to the dignity of being documented.
And so, we don't even know how many illegal immigrants in this country, and those who are making the suggestions are saying this is going to improve the state's ability to track, to regulate, and to even manage migration. But before I go to Jacinta, Sharon, as you've heard, during the last couple of weeks when we have seen these marches, these protests, the biggest concern that's being raised is we are competing for resources. There are so many illegal immigrants here that we have to compete with at public hospitals. We have to compete with when we're looking for space for our children at schools. And much are saying that's unfair on South Africans. So my question is, if you provide this amnesty, if you regularize illegal immigrants, how does that then answer the question of the resources that we are all competing for? Whether it's jobs, whether it's, public health institutions, and how overburdened the system is, that's still going to be the reality, isn't it?
No. I just want to start by saying, firstly, and it's just something that's been repeated through these marches and in interviews. Calling a migrant illegal dehumanizes a fellow human being. A person can be here undocumented, but they remain a human being. We know that apartheid dehumanized black people and used names and way they referred to us as part of the process of oppression and repression. Why I say no to your point is that it is colonization and apartheid that created structural unemployment in our inequality in our country, in the economy, and it's not the migrants to be blamed. What we are doing, this discussion is detracting from holding our state to account for failing to transform our country. The poverty, we have 55% of South Africans, that's roughly 30 million people that live below the poverty line. Now, stats from Stats SA, these are verified statistics that is by one of the most efficient departments in our country, says that that between 4 to 5% of the population of South Africa are foreign nationals out of 65 million people. So, just the maths doesn't add up to say that 3 or 4 million people are causing 30 million people to live in poverty, or to have 60% of young people unemployed. And these are not people that are uneducated. These are people who are civil engineers. These are doctors, lawyers, who have invested in their education, where, there's facts, there's records, research of how many domestic workers are struggling to ensure that their children have a better future than they had growing up under apartheid. So there is poverty, there is inequality, but it's not the migrants. We are allowing this government to get away with not dealing with transforming our country from the horrific past. And secondly, we are not holding the government to account for corruption and the mismanagement, where money is looted from the state for resources that should be going towards ensuring our public health facilities function and
are fully capacitated. Got you, Sharon. Let me bring in Jacinta now, who is the leader of March and March. Jacinta, I'm going to start just with you as well by just getting your thoughts on this proposal by some people that there must be amnesty that's provided to these undocumented migrants. Do you think that that could work? It could perhaps help even our government sort of track and trace and regulate the migrants, because now they are in the system? Or do you think this is just going to make things worse?
Thank you so much once again for the opportunity. And I'm going to ask, because Sharon and I had an interview elsewhere yesterday, and her and I kept being at odds about one and the same thing. Every time we talk about the issue of illegal immigration, she mentions this figure of 3 million foreigners. And I think that's disingenuous of her, because we are talking about illegal immigration, which currently ranges from 15 to about 30 million, because nobody actually knows the actual number of illegal immigrants in the country. So when she's dishing out statistics to try and deviate the conversation from what it's really about, then she mustn't try that, because it's not going to work anymore. This thing of making it seem like we only have 3 million foreigners. Oh goodness, how bad could it be? Second to that, she can't talk about race and tell us about this thing is about black people and black people being oppressed, when we, as the same black people, are the ones that are oppressed. And Sharon over there is busy supporting it, because we are of the belief that white people are the greatest beneficiaries of illegal immigration. One, because they now can hide behind having them as their little slaves who can do all the little things that they want by giving them cheap labor. If we as South Africans know that the laws in this country demand for a minimum wage of 100 rand,
is it only white people that are hiring illegal immigrants?
Majority. I said majority, because remember, we're talking about who runs the economy here. And we all know that the economy isn't run by black people. And I'm saying, and I did say, this is an opinion. This is an opinion, and it's not factual. Now, I'm saying, when that happens, and South Africans are saying, we want 100 rand for as required by the minimum wage, they quickly say, no, it's 20 rand as illegal immigrants, because they know they're undocumented. And that's how South Africans end up sitting at home and not working, because the capitalists are the ones making the most money out of foreign nationals. Also, government officials are the biggest beneficiaries as well, because they love claiming that there's problems, and those problems are in millions. And when you have problems in millions, then you can demand more money for that budget. We know this. On top of that, South Africans themselves, and I say this all the time, I never take away blame from South Africans, from government, from even these NGOs and NPOs like the Lawyers for Human Rights, who get funded by Open Society, who's trying to create a global culture in our country without giving us authority to have a rule over our own country. And I'm saying South Africans are also contributors of this, because they're the ones that go to these salons and go to these shops and they buy from the tuck shops, and then you end up hearing children dying from the poisoned food, etc. But back to your question about whether or not this idea of documenting them will work, I can safely say anyone who believes that must, one, let's say it's since government thinks that it's going to work, I would say I agree. They can document them, but on condition that they're going to take every single one of these immigrants that they are now documenting in their millions, and they'll keep them in their communities. Because you can't say you're going to document people and then they must be a problem for people who are poor. And they must compete with poor communities for houses, for infrastructure, for schools, for hospitals, etc. That does not make sense. The people who are busy saying that people must be documented are living in Sandton, Umhlanga, and anywhere else that is fancy. They've got high walls, they've got private hospitals, their children go to private schools. So they're not as affected as South Africans who on a daily have to deal with all of this. Because when I was saying the same thing, that if those 25 children that have today died from poisoned food had been white children, right now something would have been done about these spaza shops.
Your movement has previously argued undocumented migrants are overwhelming services because we're competing for resources. So your solution is, let's have stricter enforcement, let's have removals. But I suppose I'm trying to think of it realistically. How do you deport millions of people like that realistically? So when you document them, does that then not provide an opportunity to be able to regulate them? Because if you're saying deport, not everybody is going to come up and present themselves as an undocumented migrant. So they're still going to live within our communities secretly without really identifying themselves as undocumented. So we are not getting to the solution. So what then becomes the solution?
No, we are getting to the solution. One, because communities have expressed for themselves that they no longer want to live with illegal immigrants in their communities because they've seen the effects of it. So no government and nothing can force a community to live with people who they're not supposed to be living with in the first place. Second to that, self-deportation is always going to happen if people no longer have jobs, they no longer have buildings, they no longer have these hijacked homes that they keep living in. It's about creating a situation where none of these factors exist so that illegal immigrants can thrive. Lastly, even NGOs and NPOs like Lawyers for Human Rights going to courts and finding reasons why they should continue to live in dilapidated buildings and buildings that are hijacked while the owners are crying every day for their homes and their buildings that they invested in. And also, on top of that, if our government was serious about deporting people from outside of South Africa who are undocumented, they would have done it by now. Because we've got all these embassies who have people in their country, but you'll never hear our government calling all these embassies and saying, hey, listen, we've got a crisis here. We've got millions of your people in our country and our deportation is very costly. Therefore, we demand that for every single illegal immigrant, you fork the bill for them to go back home. You will realize then that these countries actually have an ability to stop their people from coming into South Africa in millions and millions. And once they start carrying the burden of their people in South Africa, change is going to happen.
All right. Thank you, Jacinta. Let me give Sharon an opportunity to respond to that. Sharon, what Jacinta says is we can't keep on talking about the 5% of the population or the 3 billion number because the conversation here is about undocumented migrants and not just the concept of migration. How do you respond to that?
Figure is inclusive of people who are documented or undocumented.
But our government has told us many times they don't know how many undocumented migrants are in this country. Nobody has the number. So where do we get it?
SSA produces regular quarterly reports based on birth registrations and they carry out their surveys, the census. Those are all scientific ways of providing. Yes, it is an estimation, but it's based on, there is a figure. When we hear that the country is flooded by migrants, then where's the verification for that generalization? How do we know that there's billions of people that are undocumented? How do you identify who's a documented and who's not documented? And I just want to bring a point.
So can I just correct there, Sharon, for a bit? I've just checked also because I've hosted the Statistician General here, and I've just also done a quick Google search to confirm that what I'm saying is right. But Stats SA even indicates that it does not directly measure or estimate the number of undocumented migrants because the census processes do not even ask about your legal status.
No, No, that's what I'm saying. So the 3 million or 5 million is inclusive. There's no disaggregated data. And that's a question we've got to ask. Why isn't there a mechanism to collect disaggregated data on movement of people? Because I'll put it to you, and there is research to demonstrate that there's a lot of circular migration. So people come into South Africa, they sell their goods, they buy. The Limpopo, the economy has benefited incredibly, millions from those shops that are selling goods to people coming from Zimbabwe, coming from Mozambique, buying goods in our country and taking it back because their economies are in crisis. But I just want to make a point around deportation. We can talk about deportation, and I'm not sure, you can Google this as well to verify it, but the estimated total of the cost of deportation, because the minister just announced that 500,000 people were deported in the last 3 years, that over the last 5 years, the cost, and this was a parliamentary reply, so it's documented, that it costs this country over 220 million rands over 5 years to deport people and back to their home country. So I think that, you know, the proposal for an amnesty takes into account the cost of repressive policies, the cost of keeping people in detention in police holding cells and needing to provide food for them, the cost of keeping people in Lindela. And all that money is coming from taxpayers' money. So we can have shouting about deporting people, but there's a cost, and that money could have been put back into ensuring that we can invest in our public health facilities, ensure that we have more doctors and nurses, and that there won't be such long queues, and that there's no drug stockouts, because there is a serious problem of drug stockouts in our public health facilities. And that's because of austerity measures that this government has put in place.
Sharon Ekambaram, thank you so much for joining us, manager of the Refugee and Migrant Rights Program at the Lawyers for Human Rights. I thought we should wrap up our conversation by speaking to someone who works on the front lines, who understands immigration better than many of us, Dr. Mike Masiapato, who is the Border Management Authority Commissioner, joining us on the line. Dr. Masiapato, thanks for making time. Good morning.
Good morning, Clement. We appreciate the opportunity as the BMA.
Yeah, we've been having a debate on the show this morning about whether or not regularizing undocumented migrants could work, and there are some who think it could, some who think it's not going to work, and of course policy is not where you get involved. But on the front lines, what can you tell us about just undocumented people who are crossing over? What are you seeing? And the numbers getting worse, or is it getting better?
Yeah, you see, Clement, when we took over this responsibility, with all honesty, and I suppose it is also well documented, people were literally just walking into the country. So that has been a reality. And I suppose one of the reasons for that, human beings operate in very interesting ways. If they realize that they can just walk and there is no firstly, any kind of barrier, but secondly, there is also not any element of pushback, then they keep coming because it's basically a word of mouth, and that's a reality. So that is why when we then had to come through, we had to do a number of things. And among those things that we had to do was to basically say to people, it is very much illegal to walk into another jurisdiction without paperwork. In as much as it is something that is fairly obvious, but the reality is we had to start dealing with people and make sure that there is a mentality shift. And on that basis, we started doing the work. And that is why up to this point, we can say over 600,000 people had been intercepted and stopped from entering South Africa illegally from the 1st of April 2023. Now, at that time, we were actually dealing with high numbers. And the high numbers were on the basis of the message not having reached everybody. But as the time progressed, I can confidently say we have started to see some bit of respect in terms of our laws, in terms of people just walking into the country illegally, and we have seen the numbers going down. Just lately, for example, Clement, we spoke about 68,000 that we intercepted on 4 days, on 44 days in the past. But now the numbers went down to 24,000. That is 24% decrease. And that decrease was also on the base of technology that we've deployed in the ecosystem.
Well, what about those that still somehow, go home, who are, let's take asylum seekers, for instance? Because sometimes some people present themselves to be deported, so they want you to find them because they know you're going to send them back home, and they use that opportunity as just like a, transport fee that you're donating, because they're not paying to go back home to see their loved ones. So you deport them back to Zim. Let's take Zim for an example, but they still somehow may find a way to return to South Africa. There are people who are asylum seekers, but who go back home for Christmas, who go back home for burials. How do we then explain that?
Yeah, you see, if we are to talk about the two groups that we have articulated, Clement, I suppose we were supposed to have some bit of time so that we can really dissect. But with the time that we have, let me put it this way. When an asylum seeker enters into another jurisdiction and they say, I'm running away from my country, I'm here requesting to be protected, they have to be protected and under normal circumstances cannot go back home, or even the country where they are cannot push them out, because according to UN protocols, that is called refoulement. You are basically taking them back to what they are running away from. So that is the protocol. But at the same time, there are certain conditions in which a particular asylum seeker, or what you call a refugee in a particular jurisdiction, can actually go back to their country. That is under very controlled circumstances, and it is actually managed in a very strict manner under immigration protocols. In this instance, it can be a person who is, for example, going to bury their loved one, and they go into that particular event under protection, and they're able to actually come back under protection. So there are very strict protocols in all of those. But the people you are referring to, which is the majority in this instance, is not even refugees per se. These are the people who are in the country as economic migrants, and these are the actual category that you are referring to. And these are the people that will exit South Africa, the majority of them being from within SADC. Gotcha. Because there is an agreement that they can move in between SADC for 90 days without visa, then they are able to ultimately come back. It means that they are not necessarily illegal, they are just moving under wrong pretense. So they move as visitors, visa-free, because of the 90 days, but they're actually not visitors, and they end up being employees inside the country.
Yeah. Dr. Michael Masiapato, thank you for bringing in your voice in this conversation as well.